Hey everybody, welcome back to Last Night in Vegas. I'm your host, Brian Ortega, and we have made our return to our wonderful end of the week sort of podcast. And I think it's good. I think I just needed to take a little break from doing the reviews, just sort of like live life, see these different things, and just felt like we had something to say. So I actually was visited by my parents last week, and it was my dad's birthday. Shout out to my dad. Happy birthday. And he wanted to do an Italian restaurant, which I know my dad likes sort of like that old school, like Italian red sauce kind of place. Doesn't want anything foo-foo or, new, at least, in his eyes. And we've got a couple of those places in Las Vegas. So I recommended, and I think my mom might have recommended Piero's, which Piero's has been here since the 80s and really has become a staple of sort of old school Las Vegas. And I always wanted to try this place. I've heard a lot about it. So ended up going to Piero's with my family. And I also ended up going to the Eight Cigar Lounge, which that is located at the Resorts World, which I went on that on a different day for a different project. But on this particular episode, we're going to be reviewing Piero's and give you a little sort of snippet of Eight Cigar Lounge over at the Resorts World. So this is Last Night in Vegas. Okay, everybody, so let's get started. So we're going to be talking about Piero's. So Piero's itself is an old school Italian spot. Think very like New Jersey, New York style, like red sauce, gravy Italian. Because there's so many different types of Italian cuisine. You have seafood Italian, which think like Bobby Flay's restaurant, Amalfi, which is going to be very much like by the sea, very fresh, light, sort of like, that sort of Mediterranean vibe. Piero's is not that. Piero's is red sauce, heavy, lot of proteins, and just that sort of like old school, dark, but like just has that little bit of, secret to it, if you will. And it just feels like a spot that you would find sort of like in the middle of New Jersey. I've also been watching a lot of The Sopranos lately, and this really feels like a place that you would go and have this stuff. So overall, Piero's itself is actually a nice restaurant on the inside. So it's a standalone restaurant. It's not inside of a hotel, but it's by the Las Vegas Strip. It's actually located right by the Las Vegas Convention Center, and it's like sort of on the corner of Convention Center Drive. And very interesting. You pull up, old school. They only do valet parking. The valet parking does not charge, which is actually old school Vegas, which is really nice to know. They don't charge for valet, although it's really easy if you ask any any taxi driver or Uber, obviously just punch that in and it drops you off in front of Piero's. But old school, really nice with the valet. That's really, really fun. So they park your car. And then standalone restaurant, you kind of go in, so you walk inside. There is no dress code for this place, although, you can dress a whole assortment of ways, but it doesn't feel like intimidating going in. I've been to a lot of restaurants like this where it feels like sort of done up and it feels like this is important. And Piero's is important, obviously, but no dress code. I actually looked around because my dad had this wonderful outfit that he put together. Just think Bruno Mars, if Bruno Mars was, 10, 15, 20 years older. But that's my dad. But anyways, it was his birthday. We did it. So we walked in. And first thing you see when you walk into Piero's is this bench with all of these bronze monkeys on it, which was really funny. Didn't understand the meaning behind the monkeys. And I was being nosy as I was at the table overhearing sort of the conversation. And the thing is with Piero's doesn't have any windows. Very old school Italian, very old school Vegas Italian joint, which many people, sort of the legend of Las Vegas for a lot of the old Italian joints are that the reason they didn't have any windows was so that the mobsters can eat in there comfortably without anybody knowing that they were inside of those restaurants. That's sort of like become Las Vegas lore for places like Batista's, Piero's, Golden Steer. All these places have this sort of like little sort of nuance to it. So who knows if it's a real thing, but it sort of becomes sort of like the staple of an old school spot in town. But the reason they said is that the reason they have all these monkeys around is because I guess there was a story circulating back in the day that they must have been having such a good time that they were just, doing all this monkey business inside of Piero's, which that became sort of like the mascot for Piero's on the inside. So take that as if you will. But when you walk in, it does feel like a place that you'd see sort of like in your hometown that really has sort of changed a little bit. Like maybe it's expanded, but it hasn't really changed the charm that's on the inside. So when you walk in, they're going to have like this actual like hostess stand, a really beautiful like sign on the inside, which actually looks really, really nice, which when I do the video for this, hopefully I can show you. But overall, you're going to get a very, very straightforward menu. It has like an antipasto. It also has salads and zuppa. They also have pastas. They also have their entrees, which they have a lot of beef on the menu. So they're going to have filet mignon. They have a New York strip. They also have a veal chop, which is really nice. They have Chilean sea bass, which is obviously seafood, shrimp scampi, pollo parmesan, which is going to be chicken, obviously. A lot of different proteins, eggplant parm as well. So these are very like Italian-American dishes. It's very different from like places like Mother Wolf, which I really like, which really leans into more being like Roman cuisine. So a lot more pastas. They do have pizza. They have a lot of Neapolitan pizzas, obviously, but tends to be a little bit more pasta-centric, with this one being more entree-heavy dishes as well. For example, they do have a lot of... They actually have a dish on the menu called Sunday gravy, which is actually probably one of the things that they're known for. They also have their chicken parmesan. They have their veal parmesan. Sort of like staples of sort of like this particular menu. But overall, the place itself is very dark. It actually has a couple different sections that sort of spring off. They also have two bars. They have one bar, which is sort of like their main bar, which actually has live music. They have a piano player. They also have like a stage for any live music that they have inside of that space, which you could just walk in. Like it's a really cool, like old school dark lounge. They do have TVs, which was a good thing, especially if you're going to be there at the bar. But you can see that they're sort of like installed after, so it has that sort of like, it's trying to, update, but it sort of like knows like where it's at. But the service itself, which a lot of these places, a lot of these old school joints, the service is impeccable. It's really fantastic. So there are a lot of people on the floor ready to serve you. I think our table had at least 4 people servicing our table. We had the waiter. We also had we had a runner. We also had the busser, which, again, impeccable service for this particular type of place. Also, really well-dressed waitstaff, which is really, really fantastic. They were all very, very knowledgeable and very, very helpful in terms of the menu on, this is a big dish. Maybe you should, maybe just get one of these dishes, which was my dad's birthday, so we obviously didn't pay attention. But so we sat down, and huge wine list. So if you're someone, they also have very large tables. So if you're somebody that has a very large group, I would say like maybe 8-10 people, this is a really good restaurant for larger groups. It's also not inside of a hotel, which makes us a lot easier to book for large groups, for birthdays or for bachelorette parties maybe. But if it's sort of like an interesting place because it sounds like later in the day it can get a bit louder. But for the most part, people are pretty chill, very, very much like a date spot. But I would say this is a really good date spot if like you're my age, like you're in the 30s. This is a good date spot like later in the relationship, maybe not early on, just because it could be a little intimidating because of sort of the lighting, sort of the mood, sort of it sort of has that old person feel to it, even though it's actually it's a fantastic restaurant. But it's not a place that you're going to try to like show somebody on the first date, I would say. So it's really good for families as well. It's really very much like a family sort of operation, but that's what I would recommend. So anyways, so let's get into the menu. So the menu itself, so my dad really likes fried calamari, so we ended up getting the I always forget the name of this goddamn thing, but it's the one that has miso frito. Frito misto, that's the name of it. And that has fried rock shrimp, calamari, zucchini, and all the herbs and stuff that goes along with it. So I always like to try, whenever I go to an Italian restaurant, if they have it on the menu by itself, I love trying the meatballs. Meatballs are a very important staple for me to sort of see kind of like where your sauce is at, because typically your meatball, the sauce you use on your meatballs is what you use on for a lot of the red sauce dishes further on in the menu. And the meatballs themselves are absolutely fantastic. They're very large. They're sort of like they're like sort of like they're a little bit smaller than like a softball size, and they give you two of them. They serve it on this nice plate with a bunch of sauce. It comes with these nice different pieces of garlic bread, or just bread in general. You're supposed to sort of mop up that sort of nice red sauce that sort of comes on the plate. But really good. I shared it with my parents. We also shared the calamari, of course, which was really delicious. But the thing is, I don't like getting calamari anymore just because, like, it's always good. Like, it doesn't matter, like, where you are. It's kind of the thing to do. But the meatballs themselves, absolutely fantastic. Would definitely recommend that if you end up going here and you want something as an appetizer to kind of get you sort of in the zone for all these Italian dishes. Almost got a Caesar salad. I mean, why not? They have a Caesar, they have burrata, they also have a pasta fungoli, which that looks interesting. But as we move on, I definitely wanted to do a pasta while I was here, and I was sort of like torn, but I always am a sucker for anything bolognese on it. So I ended up getting the rigatoni bolognese, which was good, very much like an old East Coast recipe. They do have onions in it. You know, you can actually see the onions in the sauce. It was good. I think I was just a little bit full, so I wasn't a huge fan of the heaviness of the dish, but they did have that. They also have their Sunday gravy, which is a rigatoni, meatballs, Italian sausage, and ricotta, which the Sunday gravy would have been a very interesting thing because I've always heard of Sunday gravy, but never actually had it. And it feels like Sunday gravy is something that you'd have to have with like a group. And with my parents there, I think that would have been a good thing to do. Also, very old school sort of East Coast dish, which is very, very popular in Las Vegas. The thing with Vegas is that a lot of like sort of like the Italians who would come to Vegas were from Chicago. You got a lot of Chicago-based mob families and groups that would come to Las Vegas because there's a neutral ground, so anybody can come here. There was no like turf, if you will. But you usually got a lot of steakhouses because Chicago has, it was Chicago and Kansas City had a lot of ties to Las Vegas in terms of the mob. And New York knew about it, but they had kind of their own thing going on. And at that time in the 40s and 50s, it's all geographical. And the thing is Kansas City and Chicago was kind of the closest outpost to Las Vegas. That's if you don't count the mafia in Los Angeles, which that tended to be more like Jewish-leaning mafias were in LA. And you got sort of like the Italian mob sort of like in the Midwest and then in New York, obviously. So as I kind of move through the menu, they do have linguine and clams. That was a very like long explanation of why they have linguine and clams. Middle neck clams. I'm not a huge fan of seafood and pasta, so I know that that's sort of like a deterrent for a lot of you, but it's sort of just my style. They also have a penne vodka, which penne vodka, very classic Italian dish. But again, lots of these very, very popular Italian dishes. So these old school like New York style Italian dishes. They have linguine pomodoro, which is like a very simple, like almost spaghetti. They have a truffle cream orchetta, I suck at this, but they do have that. So they have anguletti. I'm always terrible with the Italian pronunciations, which is hilarious. But overall, the menu itself, very approachable for anybody who's coming to Las Vegas and wants like these old school Italian dishes. I think this would be a welcome thing for you. My parents actually ended up getting one of the specials that was on the menu that day, and that was a veal parmesan, which actually was very, very large. My parents shared, and they actually asked for it, if they can cut it in half. Well, they actually, the server, forget her name right now, apologies, but she actually asked, do you want them, can we have my parents asked, can we have separate plates? And then she asked, we can cut it in half for you, which was very nice of them. And when it came out, oh my God, this thing was gigantic. I don't know how anybody eats just one of these, but the food here definitely served to be eaten family style. So just make sure that when you do order stuff here, it is presented so you're able to share with other people. I would say this is really good, especially if you have a larger group. And again, it is very, very heavy when you eat it by yourself. Like I could barely get through the rigatoni, so it was tough for me. But really good for larger groups. It's also circular tables, which is nice. We were a four top, so there were actually three of us at the four top table. But next to us was this big giant round table, kind of like sort of like a giant table you'd have like after like mass or something, but huge table, and that fit I think like almost 8 people at that one table, and it really packed them in, but really good for like a large group. So as we kind of move on, they do have their entrees, which is I just sort of mentioned that earlier, which again can be shared, definitely a thing. They also have sauces and crust, which that's very interesting to know that they have that. I'm surprised my dad didn't get the creamy horseradish, which was kind of funny, but overall, most of the things in the menu, for example, on the entrees menu, they range. They range from $45 all the way up to, $70, which actually is quite approachable for like their New York strip, which is only $73. That's actually not too bad for a steak in Las Vegas. They do have their, filet mignon, which is $65, but again, they do have their New York strip for $73, which in town is actually very, very approachable. I would probably go with the New York strip next time I went, but I don't like really getting steak at Italian restaurants because, like, what's the point? But definitely worth it here if you're looking for that. They also have their sides, which they have like broccolini, they have sauteed spinach, baby portobellas, which is actually something you don't see very often in the sides menu. So overall, enjoyed that. They do have a very nice little sort of like dessert cart that comes out. So it's not really a cart. It's actually more of a tray, which she brings it out and she shows you these are the things we have. And my dad ended up getting what did my dad get? My dad had to get the creme brulee, which actually had Nutella on the very bottom of it, which he very, very much enjoyed. And me and my mom shared some cannoli. They were smaller. They're pretty good, I guess. I don't really like cannolis, so I have no idea what a good one tastes like, but I've had a few in my life. I went to New York, had a couple cannoli there, but overall I can't tell you like if it's good or bad or not, but it did the job. But my dad really liked his creme brulee, which is important. They also have ice cream if you'd like, and they're really into sort of this coffee. Like they really like coffee after the dinner. So overall, the Piero's experience was really, really good. I think it was really good, especially in terms of being a family dinner. It was really, really fun to go there with my parents, who are of a certain age, who I think they really enjoyed it, and they sort of like that sort of blast from the past. And if you're really wanting that sort of vibe, there's not a lot of restaurants that do that anymore. Piero's is obviously one. You have Batista's Hole in the Wall, which I wouldn't put this on the same level as Batista's, just in terms of food quality. You also have Golden Steer, which everybody loves to rave about. You have a couple places downtown, of course, but Golden Steer has really gotten to the point where it's so popular, it just takes forever to get reservations, and it is out of this world expensive to actually eat that at that place anymore. So, overall, I think this place is actually a really good bang for your buck, and it also has plenty of reservations, but the restaurant was not empty. So I was very surprised because when I made the reservations online, they just had all these possible reservation times available. And when I got there, we got there around, our dinner was earlier in the day, so it was around 6:30. But we got there, kind of getting there, but not super busy yet. But then by the time we were in the middle of our meal and about ready to leave, the place was popping. You had people waiting in the dining room, in the hostess area, and then the bars were all full. You had people coming in and out, and my dad had a funny like interaction because he was there, and as we were waiting for our car to pull up, he turned to this older gentleman and said, "Oh yeah, she has a nice dress on," and like blah blah blah. It's like, "Oh, you guys are a very good looking couple." Although I think I do that too, so I think I get that from my dad 100%. But hey, we're personable people. So he thought nothing of it. Like, oh, look, no big deal. And my dad's, from Tucson. So as the older couple comes out and they're just, they're walking up to their car, And he's surprised to find out that they are the ones who own the Bentley that's sitting right in front of the valet area. So he said, "Oh my God, I just said, hey, you guys are a nice looking couple, and then boom, you get in a Bentley." So I thought that was a really funny interaction that my dad had. So that was fun. But overall, Piero's I would recommend to anybody who's here for like a large group with maybe your parents who want sort of that old school Vegas feel. I think Piero's would be really good for anybody who wants to check that out. So now I'll go ahead and talk about the 8 Cigar Lounge that I ended up going to for an assignment. So that'll be coming up next. Okie dokie. So let's talk about 8 Cigar Lounge. So 8 Cigars is located at Resorts World. It's actually closed off from like the rest of the entire hotel. So when you actually see it, it's just sort of like this flat space with sort of a storefront in the front of it. But you can't see what's going on the inside, which is very, very interesting and very, very intriguing. Because I had a guest, shout out to Cole, who's coming to Vegas with his wife. And they had all these sort of like things they wanted to do while they were here. And again, this is actually a good sort of reminder that if you are coming to Las Vegas and you want me to sort of write out or give you some recommendations or maybe even do a pod about things to do in Las Vegas for your specific trip, go ahead and reach out to me on any of my socials, Brian_Ortega26 or at conciergeconfidential_LV. Send me a DM or whatever, and I'll go ahead and look at it, and I'll try to get back to you either by, just a quick recommendation, or sometimes if you give me like a detailed sort of description of where you're staying, and when I say detailed description of where you're staying, just like where on the strip you are staying. You don't have to tell me your room number or your folio or anything like that. But just let me know. I'll go ahead and look through it, and then I'll give you some of my better recommendations for that particular event. But one of the things that he wanted to do was smoke cigars while he was in town without bothering other people. And it's sort of a cop-out just to give a cigar lounge as a recommendation for that, because we actually have many. But like the thing is, you're kind of like secluded to that area. So the one that I did give a recommendation for, which I think is the really good recommendation, is for Legacy Club over in downtown at the Circa. This place actually has a view of the Las Vegas Strip. It's on the top floor. They're very cool with you smoking cigars, but it is not specifically a cigar lounge. They also have, cutters. They have a light for you up there as well. So it's actually a good place for cigars, but you do have to be a little bit dressed up to go in there. So just make sure that you are dressed to impress, as we say. But other than that, I wanted to have another option. There's actually a place at Caesars that does a cigar lounge, which is actually right next to the Cleopatra Barge, which is currently under renovation. But that place is actually located right off the main casino floor. But we're not talking about that one today. So let's talk about 8. So as I walk up to the 8 area, or the 8 Cigar Lounge, I go ahead and check in with the hostess, which for the most part, you're not going to be blowing past the hostess at this spot just because the door's closed, and I had no idea what it was like on the inside. So if you are going to be more than 2 people and you want a space to sit, they do not charge for the reservation for those places during the week. But I did check with the hostesses at the front that when you when you do go to 8 Cigar Lounge, that if it is a Friday or Saturday, you are charged a food and beverage minimum. Typically it's cocktails because that's really all they have on the inside, or cigars. But it's typically $100 per person spending minimum. So if there's 4 of you, it's $400 spending minimum. It's $100 a person, essentially, which honestly, it's pretty easy to hit. You have a couple cocktails. If you have, a cigar or 2, you're going to be, spending that much on the inside. So kind of doable, but again, that's how they go. But when you walk in, it's actually a very large space, really large room. And it was funny because I walked in and I was like, I hope no one's smoking cigars in the cigar lounge, but you understand. So you walk in, and beautiful bar, actually pretty decent size bar. They have two giant TVs up there. I would say it seats probably about 15 to 16 people at the bar, and each one of the seats was full. So this place was popping. You're going to understand that you are in a cigar lounge because everybody is smoking cigars. It's just, that's what you do. So The space itself, very large, a lot of leather chairs, which is really nice. They also have an outdoor area that actually has a little like place, like a fire pit kind of, that actually looks out to Las Vegas Boulevard, but still kind of secluded to the outside world. But overall, the space itself is really good for like a group of guys to hang out. If you guys want to, sit, watch the games. This is a good place. This is definitely an after-hour spot. That's the way it felt. It felt like a good place to sort of wind down. Maybe you have like a cognac, maybe you have a whiskey, vodka, but definitely a spot that you're going to sort of hang, listen to some good music. The vibes are great. I really liked the sort of classic hip-hop sort of feel of the inside of this place, but it did feel like a refined area. It did not feel like your run-of-the-mill sort of cigar lounge. So overall, I thought it was a great spot. I had a really good time, even though I didn't smoke any cigars. But if I did, they do have a place where you can purchase said cigars. They also have like a bunch of like paraphernalia, like lighters, cutters, all that other fun stuff. So they do have an attendant for that particular space. But overall, highly recommend that to anybody who wants to smoke cigars. I think that would be a really great choice. Also, Resorts World, like, let's just talk about it really quick. Really good country bar. So they have a place called the Doghouse, which is actually part of like their sports book. Sportsbook's trash. The sportsbook is absolutely terrible. Do not bet sports at Resorts World. But their country music lineup, pretty good. Didn't know the guy who was singing, but nice country bar. Good, not like a very nice. They have 2 big bars that are open when it is busy, like on the weekends. But this day, they just had the 1 bar open, but I would have been able to, walk up and sit at the bar. But really fantastic. I would have just loved to sit there, listen to the music, just chilling, people watching. Really underrated, I would say, Doghouse over at Resorts World. Great country bar for anybody who wants country music. Highly recommend it. Definitely recommend doing that. More than like, what's the place called? Old Red. Old Red, too touristy, too many people. I wasn't a fan of it. Gillies, a little bit older. But Doghouse, really good. They have an area where you can dance. They have areas you can sit down. And I think this is a good spot. I think this would be really, really good for anybody who wants to throw their boots on, head down to Resorts World. I think that's a really good country bar. But overall, that was sort of like the addition to our main course, which was Piero's. But thanks again to everybody for sort of bearing with me for this channel. We're kind of going through a lot of changes and all that other good stuff. I'm trying to sort of do more of like a movie pod sort of on the side or doing something in that nature. So just, stay tuned for any announcements I might have. But thank you so much for always listening to Concierge Confidential. I always appreciate it. Throw me any ideas you might have on any of my socials. And again, check those all out. Hopefully I'll put up the Piero's video pretty soon. But again, thank you so much for following me. If you see me out in town, remember to come up, say hello. But remember, keep it confidential.